Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome to the channel. UFC President Dana White made a bunch of fight announcements, the biggest being the breaking news that the new UFC 288 co-main event will be Belal Muhammad versus Gilbert Burns, a 5-round co-main event. This video is going to be my reaction, my early prediction for that fight, and we're also going to discuss, I made a video earlier this week that I believe I will get some comments on this video about I believe the UFC should cut Gilbert Burns after some comments he made. And I stand by that argument 100%. We're going to talk about that later in the video. And we're also going to discuss how I believe there is a real possibility here that Colby Covington could lose his welterweight title shot. We're going to talk about that later in the video as well. So initial reaction to this, we got a bunch of different news, and I'm going to make a couple different videos on, just Dana White's announcements from tonight. One being the original co-main event for this card at UFC 288 was Charles Oliveira versus Beneil. There was speculation that it was going to be moved till June at UFC 289 and be the co-main event for Amanda Nunes versus Juliana Pena 3, the fight that nobody wants to see. And I was a little bit worried that might not happen. That is confirmed also. Charles Oliveira versus Beneil has been moved to UFC 289 and will be the co-main event. But I'm going to make an entirely different video on that. So as soon as that's done, I will link it down in the description. You guys can go check it out after this. But reaction to Belal Muhammad versus Gilbert Burns, I couldn't be happier. And, I complain when the UFC makes mistakes. I complain when the UFC has horrible matchmaking or they have fights that are horrible placement on a card. I have to applaud the UFC for making this matchup, and not only making this matchup, but making it a 5-round fight. That is so meaningful in a fight like this, in this division, in a fight of this capacity. It needed to be 5 rounds. I was a little bit worried whether or not it would be because it is short notice, but I am so happy that this fight is 5 rounds. But UFC 288 absolutely needed this fight, and that's why the UFC came together. I'm assuming they probably paid both Belal Muhammad and Gilbert Burns a substantial amount to fight on this card, because subtracting that off this card, the co-main event was Jessica Andrade versus Yan Xiaonan. The main event, as you guys know probably already, Aljamain Sterling versus Henry Cejudo. But after that, it was a fight night card at best. I mean, Movsar Evloev versus Bryce Mitchell was a solid matchup, but that isn't carrying a pay-per-view by any capacity. I mean, this card was looking horrible, and now it's looking so much better with Belal Muhammad versus Gilbert Burns, because now you have Aljamain Sterling versus Henry Cejudo, Belal Muhammad, Gilbert Burns. Then you have Jessica Andrade versus Yan Xiaonan, which is meaningful in the division. You have Drew Dober versus Matt Frevola, I'm assuming will be on the main card. You have Movsar Evloev, Bryce Mitchell. It's a solid card. It's not a UFC 287 or a UFC 285. But it is now a solid card rather than a fight night card that it was before. So I couldn't be happier that this fight was announced. It makes perfect sense in the grand scheme of the division if you are giving Colby Covington a title shot. But now, because it's happening so early in the year, there's a chance the winner of this fight could jump over Colby and get a title shot. And when I say jump over Colby, I mean because the UFC has already anointed Colby as the #1 contender, even though he doesn't deserve it. But we'll talk about that later in the video. Belal Muhammad's on a 8-fight win streak. It depends how you look at the no contest versus Leon Edwards. You could technically say he's only on a 4-fight win streak, but he has not lost in his last 8 fights that have actually had, been counted. It's not a no contest. And he's beat top contenders and up-and-coming guys. All 3 of his last wins were against top 10 ranked guys. His last win was at UFC 280 in October against Sean Brady. The win before that was against Vicente Luque. The win before that was against Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. So Belal Muhammad was arguably already the #1 contender. And now he's stepping in versus Gilbert Burns, who Gilbert Burns, he's only on a 2-fight winning streak, and it's against Neil Magny and Jorge Masvidal. But you look at the division right now, Gilbert Burns is in a very good position in the division. And guess what? Leon Edwards is the new champ. Or, I mean, not really the new champ, but you get my point. The saga with Kamaru Usman between him and Leon Edwards is done. Leon Edwards is the champion. We don't have to worry about that anymore. We have to look at future contenders. And basically, the contenders right now are Belal Muhammad, Gilbert Burns, Colby Covington, and Shavkat Rakhmonov. Those are the top guys, considering that Khamzat Chimaev is moving to middleweight. And Gilbert Burns was in a very good position after dominating Jorge Masvidal at UFC 287. I believed that Gilbert Burns, maybe with one more fight, could have been in title contention, depending on what happened with Belal Muhammad, if he ended up fighting Shavkat or whatnot. But now, it's perfect. It's perfect because so long, for so many years, we've been getting the welterweight division that refuses to fight each other. And that's why I made a video recently about the welterweight division, because it's like everyone's turning down everyone. Everyone wants to sit out for a year and get a title shot. And I thought, oh, great. Now Colby Covington has set the precedent. I'm going to sit out for a year in witness protection. I'm going to turn down every fight, and I'm going to walk into a title shot against Leon Edwards, even though he was 2-2 in his last 4 and coming off a win over Jorge Masvidal, which isn't even a quality win. Gilbert Burns kind of in that same spot, but you know, he's on a 2-fight winning streak at least, not a 1-fight winning streak, and he's not being elevated off a loss to Kamaru Usman. You know, that's Colby Covington's best win, is a loss to Kamaru Usman. But now we have Belal Muhammad versus Gilbert Burns, and honestly, if everything was a meritocracy, this is a clear-cut #1 contender fight. You look at the division right now, unless you want to say Shavkat Rakhmonov because he's on like a long win streak and because he has all finishes and because he beat a top 10 guy in his last fight, but that was his first top 10 guy, you know, against Jeff Neal. Unless you want to make the argument for Shavkat, which I don't think really anyone is making, Belal Muhammad versus Gilbert Burns winner should be next in line for a welterweight title shot, because, you know, if Belal wins, he's on a 9-fight winning streak. If Gilbert wins, he's on a 3-fight winning streak. That's better than everyone else in the division right now currently. You know, outside of Shavkat, but again, the level of competition outside his most recent win hasn't been the greatest, so the argument for Shavkat really isn't there. And I love this style matchup because you have Belal Muhammad, who's a very good grappler. You know, he went out there, out-grappled Neil Magny, or not Neil Magny, he went out there, out-grappled Wonderboy Thompson, he went out there, out-grappled Vicente Luque, and then against Sean Brady, who is a very good grappler himself, Belal Muhammad went out there and TKO'd him in the second round, a brutal TKO. And Sean Brady was undefeated, up and coming. A lot of people thought, oh, he's a future contender. Belal Muhammad sent him to the back of the line. And then you have Gilbert Burns, who has very good striking, has very good stamina, has very good grappling, has very good jiu-jitsu. And that's what makes this matchup so compelling. But ultimately, what I think this fight comes down to is what kind of shape are these guys in? Because Gilbert Burns just fought on April 8th. This fight will take place on May 6th at UFC 288. Belal Muhammad hasn't fought since October. What kind of shape is he in? I don't know. And that's what kind of has a question mark. But I don't believe Belal Muhammad's taken this fight for 5 rounds. And Dana White said both guys asked for 5 rounds. I don't think he's taken this fight unless he's in good shape to be able to go 5 rounds. And when I look at their skill sets, this is a very tough fight to pick. This is a very, you know, even fight to pick, in my opinion. And you just have to congratulate both guys, or give both guys props, really, for taking this fight on 2 weeks' notice. A fight of this magnitude against, you know, a fighter this good, whether it's Belal Muhammad, Gilbert Burns, you know, Gilbert Burns is very good, or Gilbert Burns versus Belal Muhammad, who's very good. To take this type of matchup on 2 weeks, I know people recently in the last couple days been saying Belal Muhammad's ducking Gilbert Burns, and I kept saying to these people, you have to wait and see. I still believe it will happen. You have to wait and see. So shout out to Gilbert Burns, shout out to Belal Muhammad for taking this fight. I guarantee in a million years, Colby Covington, even if he wasn't getting the title shot, he would have never took this fight. He would have went deep into witness protection. He would have changed his name. He would have wore a fake mustache and the glasses with the googly eyes and the big nose. And he would have never even sniffed this fight ever in a million years. So one thing I want to say is shout out to Belal Muhammad. Shout out to Gilbert Burns. It's amazing that they're willing to take this fight. But I do worry, is Gilbert Burns going to be in better shape? And I do hate a little bit. I hate when fights of this magnitude are on short notice, because I feel like no matter what happens, there's always a bit of an asterisk next to them. So I do hate that aspect of it, but I still do love this fight. As far as an early prediction, when I look at this fight, I look at Gilbert Burns, who he has very good jiu-jitsu and he has very good wrestling, but his wrestling is only really good against guys who aren't elite grapplers themselves, or even not like very good grapplers. You know, he's out grappling Neil Magny, who's a decent grappler, but I expected Gilbert Burns to out grapple him and submit him early. Gilbert Burns wasn't out grappling a guy like Khamzat Chimaev, but Khamzat Chimaev is massive. He out grappled a Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. But will he be able to out-grapple Belal Muhammad? I don't believe he will. So that leads me to believe that this fight is going to be contested on the feet. Who is the better striker? I think Gilbert Burns has very good power, but I think Belal Muhammad's the more technical striker. So that's what makes this fight so hard to pick. But I look at Gilbert Burns. He ate a few shots from Jorge Masvidal. he didn't really, I mean, he had success taking down Jorge Masvidal, but not a domination in terms of takedowns and grappling. But was he really trying for it? Was he trying to prove a point? It's hard to say. I think Belal Muhammad will be able to stuff the takedowns of Gilbert Burns. And I think for an early prediction, this is probably not going to change, but I'm going to watch tape and I will make an early actual official prediction the week of the fight. I'm going Belal Muhammad. I'm going Belal Muhammad via TKO. Gilbert Burns has been a bit chinny in his past. I know that's a bit of a trope because, you know, chinny, okay, he got hurt against Khamzat Chimaev. He got hurt and finished against Kamaru Usman, but he's really only been finished by TKO or KO twice, but you're getting hurt by a jab by Khamzat Chimaev. You're getting hurt by a jab of Kamaru Usman. Belal Muhammad has decent power in his hands and his striking is evolving. So for an early prediction, I am going Belal Muhammad. I'm going to say like second round TKO, third round TKO. We'll get to more specifics when we actually get to UFC 288. But shout out to both guys for taking this fight. In terms of my previous video early this week, because I got a lot of hate on this and I think a lot of people were misunderstanding the concept of the video, I said the UFC should cut Gilbert Burns. And people kept saying, Gilbert Burns will accept any fight. He's fighting killers and blah, blah, blah. He fought Khamzat Chimaev when nobody else wanted to. The concept of that video was Gilbert Burns said at the UFC 287 post-fight presser, he said, give me a title shot or cut me. And what I was specifying in the video is if Gilbert Burns is only allowing for those two options, then the UFC needs to cut him. We don't need to just let guys sit out for however long and then walk into undeserved title shots. That is all I was saying. I was saying if Gilbert Burns' only two options is I'm going to wait out for a title shot with a win over Jorge Masvidal, who hasn't won a fight since 2019, then cut him. But, you know, Gilbert Burns obviously didn't really mean that 100%. Maybe he was just trying to, you know, maybe get, you know, some type of story put out there in the media, kind of get some attention around his name. And he saw what Colby Covington did and he hoped he could get the same thing. So I do still stand behind that. I like Gilbert Burns. He's one of my favorite fighters to watch. I'm happy he's still in the UFC. I'm happy he's fighting Belal Muhammad. But again, if those were the only two options, I said the option needed to be selected to cut him from the organization. We can't just have guys sitting out or just ice him, offer him fights for non-titles. And if he turns them down, just keep extending him. So now that we're off that topic, how does this affect the division? Because you just had Leon Edwards beat Kamaru Usman at UFC 286 in the trilogy, kind of closed that chapter against Kamaru Usman. And Colby Covington weighed in as a backup during fight week. And Dana White went on the press tour, talked about the post-fight presser. Colby Covington will get the next UFC welterweight title shot. And he was very adamant. And I made an entire video about this, and I've reiterated this in multiple videos. The reason I believe Dana did that, and you can go find those videos on my channel if you want, I believe Kamaru Usman was close to pulling out of UFC 286, enough where the UFC was scared, where they called Colby Covington the week of the fight, and they said, look, can you weigh in as a backup fighter? Because we know Colby Covington doesn't get, you know, he's not a big welterweight. So they called him up, he flew to the UK, he weighed in, and was ready and on standby to potentially save the card. Because if Usman pulled out, the card was non-existent if you didn't have that welterweight title shot. So Colby Covington did the UFC favor, and the UFC loves when guys do that. So Colby was essentially getting Dana White privilege without Dana coming out and saying it. You know, he wasn't coming out and saying, look, Colby was going to save this card. And I understand why he doesn't say that, because if you say, oh, Kamaru Usman was close to pulling out, which again, I don't know this to be true. This is just my speculation of why he's been so adamant about it. But then if you say that, you kind of delegitimizes Leon Edwards' win. So I think that is the real reason that Colby's getting a title shot. But what happens now if Belal Muhammad or Gilbert Burns gets a very solid win at UFC 288? Imagine Belal Muhammad comes out there and finishes Gilbert Burns in the first round, or finishes him in the second round. It's an impressive victory, or vice versa. Imagine Gilbert Burns goes out there, shoots a takedown on Belal, or drops Belal, and then snatches up a guillotine or something along those lines and gets an impressive win. I believe the winner of Muhammad versus Burns is the unequivocal number one contender in the welterweight division and should get a shot at Leon Edwards. And Leon Edwards said, I'm probably not fighting until early fall, October, he suggested. I believe it was UFC 294 in Abu Dhabi. So what happens with Colby there? I think there is a chance that Colby Covington could lose his title shot. And I think Colby Covington is probably looking at this fight and saying, oh God, I pray one of these guys doesn't get like a Jorge Masvidal, Ben Askren moment. Because if one of these guys somehow gets like a Jorge Masvidal flying knee 5-second KO or something equal in terms of It's viral online. It's crazy. It blows their name up. They will probably skip over Colby. But I think what actually is going to happen, I think the UFC paid both these guys very well. And I also think they said, look, you will be #1 contender after Colby Covington. We've already guaranteed Colby the shot. We are going to give him a shot against Leon Edwards. You will be next. You can wait for that fight. But it just sucks because if Leon's not fighting till October, I mean, we're talking that's 5 months away. So hopefully what the UFC does is maybe they get Leon Edwards to move up his timeline. Maybe it's not July, but maybe it's like August. Maybe it's early September. And he fights Colby in early September. And then the winner of Belal Muhammad, Gilbert Burns, fights for the title. The winner of Colby Covington versus Leon Edwards. Maybe December, January, February, somewhere around that. Maybe early 2024 is the most likely. But I really hope we don't have a situation where Belal Muhammad or Gilbert Burns is sitting out for a prolonged period of time. And I really hope we're not in a situation where, they have to take another fight. Imagine Belal or Gilbert wins this fight. And then imagine later this year they have to fight Shavkat Rakhmonov, maybe in November, December for a #1 contender fight. That would be an absolute slap in the face to both guys for taking this fight on 2 weeks' notice and willing to step in there with one of the best guys in the world, regardless who you're looking at, Belal Muhammad or Gilbert Burns. But ultimately, I think this saves UFC 288, makes it much better, makes it a legitimate pay-per-view. And I love this fight. And I hope, in a perfect world for me, if you want to know my perfect world, the winner of Belal Muhammad versus Gilbert Burns fights Leon Edwards in his next title defense. That is a perfect world for me. I'm curious what you guys think, so let me know what you think about all this down in the comments. Do you think the winner of Muhammad versus Burns should be the next title challenger against Leon? Should Colby be skipped over? Colby doesn't deserve a title shot, in my opinion. So I know people are saying he's a draw and this and that. He's really not. But I think the winner should get the #1 contender spot. They should fight Leon next. I don't believe it will happen. I think the UFC is really solidified in giving Colby that shot because of what he did for them. But I'm very curious what you guys think. So do me a favor, leave a comment, let me know. Also, do me a favor, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to like the video. Also, we are getting very close to 10,000 subscribers. So if you could subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, I would greatly appreciate it. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you in the next video.